Identifying the Elephant in the Room, Critical Communication Strategies in the Face of Sexism. I am Amy Summers. I'm your series director. I'm also founder and president of Pitch Publicity and INICIVOX, who's putting on this series for you. And I'm so excited to have a longtime industry friend with me co-hosting today, Tom Aarts. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Amy. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me to join this session today on a topic that I have to say I didn't know much about when you asked me to join, but I've now studied up on it, and I'm very excited to be here and be part of this panel and discussion with you.
Well, I love it that you're here. You know, when I was thinking about having you on this week, I was counting up the years that we've known each other, and we've actually known each other now for 18 years, which is pretty incredible. I mean, that's longer than most people are married. That's longer than I've ever been married to anybody. So, I mean, that's pretty astonishing. And I'm just gonna, so that I don't have to take up the whole time talking about this, I wrote a really lovely post about Tom and my relationship in this industry on LinkedIn. So you have to go check that out. But just to briefly tell everybody, the first time we met, we worked on this project for Vitamin Angels. And I remember just on that trusting thing, because when I asked you to be on the sexism series, you said to me, we were at IHS, and you said, Amy, I'm not sure, but I trust you. And so you said the same thing to me at Vitamin Angels. I just want to remind you, because everybody needs to know this. When we did our first fundraiser for Vitamin Angels, I told Tom that at Expo East in Baltimore, he had to go on stage and just ask people for money. Do you remember that? And you were like, what?
which I had no experience doing and didn't feel comfortable with doing, but it ended up working out with your coaching and transformed Vitamin Angels and lots of kids.
Yeah. So I think that same bravery coming on here is great. And I'm really excited to have you on, especially because I see the big sign in the background, NBJ Summit. And actually your conference has been a discussion point on some of our panels as we're talking about this male-dominated industry. And, you know, that maybe it's a little bit of a boys' club. So I just kind of want to get this out of the way so it's not the elephant in the room with us. But can you, you said something yesterday during our rehearsal that I thought was really, really exciting about your plans for NBJ Summit this year and the intention that you have behind inviting people to come. And I wanted you to tell us a little bit about what you're planning that people might not know about.
Sure. Yeah. So this is sort of the elephant in the room here, right? So the NBJ Summit. Yeah, no, I think it's best for me to start off by saying, just to be totally, honest and transparent. I think the NBJ Summit, which I started like 25 years ago, with an investment banking group of friends, four men were partners in this group, right? And then we started the CEO event back in 1998. And we didn't really think much about diversity back then, or having a balanced group of people there, and women with leaders in the industry. And quite frankly, there weren't many. I mean, I'm a numbers guy, a market guy. And if you looked around back in 1998 to 2002, and in those years, I don't think you could find many women CEOs, at least in the supplement business that I knew of. I think there are more in the natural products business. Well, that's totally changed today. And that's just the demographics. And I think we as an organization, and me personally, need to move with the times and really understand what's happening in society and in the market. And I've had some learning. I mean, I think for many years, we never really heard that comment in the beginning. It was only in the last 5 or 7 years. And Carlotta Mast, who's the head of New Hope content, actually the head of all New Hope, became co-chair in about 6 years ago. Maybe it was 7 years ago. And since then, she has really helped me and the summit become much more diversified. And, we're not perfect, but, a few years ago, we actually said, okay, let's make an effort. How many women CEOs do we have here today, C-level executives? And I think, I don't know the exact statistics, but 5 or 6 years ago, it was about 10, 15% of the audience. Last year, we know to the T, it was like 26 or 27% of the audience. And this year, we are tracking towards about a third of the audience. So again, all those, it's hard to change sometimes a reputation, or hard to change when you started off that way. But I believe we're moving in the right direction. And Carlotta, who's definitely a big advocate and has made me an advocate, that we want to have half the women there. I think the speakers this year, we're going to have almost between a third and a half of our speakers are going to be either women or people of diversity.
Well, I just want to say too that, when I started my company, Pitch Publicity, I remember going to my first NBJ Summit, and I've been, of course, to many, many of them. And I've always said this about NBJ Summit. So I'm speaking to you women out there that might be considering going this year, that even early in my career, when I was just building pitch, it was the best conference to attend. It was, it's definitely more expensive than some of the other ones, but the quality of networking at NBJ Summit really, really helped me build my business. And I gained a lot of very quality clients from there, Tom, that I think that really helped shape where I am today. So, which is why, I know I've been a sponsor of NBJ Summit before, and that's why I put a lot of time and energy there. So I know it can be a little intimidating, especially when the majority of people are not like you. And I've even been NBJ Summit and felt intimidated by the women there, but I love that you're trying to bring this diversity in a little bit more and make it more accessible. And I think that will make more people comfortable. And I think there'll be a lot to gain from it. I think women will have a lot to gain from coming.
Yes, and I think the thing we try to do at the summit, it's one of the themes or the the core values of the summit, which I try to bring as the co-chair, is that we want the summit to be a place where people can feel comfortable working through their issues in their businesses, but also learning about the industry. And one of the things I say, which you probably, I don't know if you were there last year, but I ask all the new people to stand up, and we have had the comment where like, hey, this feels like a fraternity, or this, whether it's men or women, it feels like we can't break in. So over the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, we've made an effort to try to help the newcomers kind of get connected to the people that have been around. And then the people that have been there, we reach out very distinctly to say, hey, could you help some of the new folks there? I think last year when I introduced everybody, I did this spontaneously from the stage. I kind of sometimes speak spontaneously. I said, okay, all the new people stand up that have first come to the summit. They're about 130. And I said, if you've been around to the summit, please recognize these people, go give them a hug post-COVID. So. Yeah,
and I have to tell you, I tell this story all the time, but one of the best clients that I picked up from the summit early on in my career was actually Dean Mosca. You know Dean?
Oh, yeah.
So anybody in the industry
I talked to him a long time.
Yeah, anyone in the industry that knows Dean Mosca knows that he is like a professional level golfer. So there's a great golfing at NBJ Summit. Dean always attends that, of course. Dean is also a fashionista. I mean, he is dressed to the nines on the golf course all the time. But the funny thing about Dean was he would skip all the sessions and kind of do the golfing. And I was trying to get him as a client, and I literally, like during one of the networking breaks at NBJ Summit, he was just, I don't know, taking a phone call, and I went out there and I just couldn't strike a conversation with him because I don't play golf and I didn't have much in common, but I mean, he's always very fashionable. So I told Dean, I said, you are the best dressed person at NBJ Summit. And he looked right at me and he said, yeah, thanks. He goes, can you get me that proposal now? I mean, that is exactly how the conversation went. That's how I got my first proposal contract with Dean Mosca when he was running proprietary nutritional ingredients. And then every contract he signed with me after that, which there was probably like 10 or 12 after that, I would always mail him another fancy golf shirt as a thank you. But that was all because of the NBJ Summit. It allows for these networking access opportunities to get to these big executives that you would never be able to like strike up a conversation with anywhere else.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And we welcome anybody that's listening to come to the summit, and just email me, or we can get you on the registration list. I think that this topic also, one of our themes this year is sort of navigating uncharted waters. because of what's going on in the economy and the world and the war and all this, this topic that you're addressing. I mean, it's just, all over the place. And this is something that's an uncharted water or a challenge for executives and companies and leaders to navigate. And I, personally have had to try to navigate it as well, and try to do what's best. I never felt I was biased against any other. In fact, I probably feel I'm like the most unbiased person, but sometimes I'm unconscious about it, right? I'm just not thinking about it. It's funny because I have zero feelings of any racism or anything like that. I was brought up that way from my mom. It's like, that's kind of like my value system. But then on the other side, where I can learn is just sometimes I'm not, and I know this has come up in previous sessions, like I'm not conscious about how important this is to address at my conscious level and be aware of it, as opposed to like, oh, it's not a problem for me. That doesn't matter. It might be a problem for others.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting too. I think in the whole series, what we've learned is that sexism is so layered and there's so many different types of sexism. I think we're going to get into that with the panel today. And actually, speaking of networking, the next conference coming up is Supply Side East. It's next week. If you were going to be there, I hope that you're able to join us. I'm putting some information in the chat. We are having a networking workshop. We're going to do a speed networking workshop based on the Elephant in the Room series. And we're going to practice and role play some of these things. I've got several panelists that have been part of the series that are coming to help us do this networking and just learn how to do networking a little bit better. I think it goes to what you say, Tom. It's just sometimes it can be the simplest thing as introducing the person next to you, elevating them up, presenting them in a certain way. I remember for years, people thought that I worked at New Hope at NBJ Summit because I was a woman. They're like, oh, do you work here? I was like, no, I have my own company. They were like, really?
I remember that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's no offense to all the women, the great women that work at New Hope, but I just thought it was funny that because I was there, they just automatically thought I just worked at New Hope, but they didn't know I was at.
We one time, Amy, this is probably airing some dirty laundry, but I can't remember what year, but we had a speaker, like a keynote speaker, a very powerful speaker, and they were getting coffee or something like that, and one of the executives asked her to get some coffee for him, thinking that she worked for NBJ Summit because I think she had an NBJ badge on or whatever. So, I mean, honest mistake, but she actually told that story on stage, I think. The actually subject matter wasn't about equality or diversity or women's rights or anything or sexism. It was much more, she just sort of made a little side comment that maybe we ought to, that how funny this industry is, and it might be a little male dominated or something like that. And it was really interesting because I remember that story. I mean, I can't remember when it happened, but that stuck in my brain. And as I was doing this with you, I thought, well, let me think of some examples of things where, we've had some interesting things happen.
Well, I feel like you and I could do this for a whole hour, but in about 2 minutes, we're going to get going on the panel. And
great.
It feels like we've been in a confessional together for NBJ Summit. So this has actually been a lot of fun. I know you don't have I don't think you have a Catholic background. Do you have a Catholic background?
I am brought up 100% Catholic.
Oh, then you know all about confessionals. So this has been like confessionals
right.
at NBJ Summit. Maybe you should have a confessional there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean, and again, we always, I mean, one of my philosophies about the summit and my life in general is I always want to raise the bar, right? Always, and I tell our team that, like how can we raise the bar? And we always like to have more CEO executives, have a better program, have more connections, better networking. But on diversity and having women executives there, we are determined to raise the bar. And I ask everybody to have patience that maybe in the past, we were sort of dominated by white males and stuff, but I think now it's changing and we want to lead that. And so I'm open to any suggestions. I know Carlotta is, and even during the panel, if anybody's listening has any suggestions or any input, I'm happy to take it. Thank you for letting me talk to you today.
Yes. And Tom is going to be joining us for After the Elephant immediately after this panel. We'll be putting all that information in the chat. We're not going to do it right now because we're about to go to this panel. And I also want to let you know that this is our last kind of awareness learning panel this week. Next week, I put in the chat, we have session 6. We have some people that have been participating in this panel that have some ideas, that they want to activate in the industry. We're going to give them that platform next week. So I hope you can join us because they're going to want to brainstorm those ideas with you. We got a lot of good ideas from last panel. I put them in the chat right now. Some of our top takeaways are in the chat, and I am very excited to introduce you to our panel for session 5. So if you're just joining us, welcome. This is Identifying the Elephant in the Room, Critical Communication Strategies in the Face of Sexism. Today, we are taking a closer look at the supplements, ingredients, and pet sectors of the industry. I am here, Amy Summers, your series director, with my co-host today, Tom Aarts from Nutrition Business. He is here talking about MBJ Summit. We just heard a lot about that. If you missed it, go look up in the chat or watch the replay later. But now we are very excited, Tom and I, to introduce our panel. So I am going to start with Harper Hall. Harper is a global flavor applications and technical service lead at Ingredion and supports Ingredion's DEI initiatives such as self-ID, access, and policy creation. In addition to volunteering with Informa's JEDI Content Creation Advisory Council and Naturally Proud Network's Board of Directors, Harper assists Garden State Equality, New Jersey's largest LGBTQ+ advocacy organization. Harper holds a Bachelor of Professional Studies in Baking and Pastry Arts Management from the Culinary Institute of America and a Bachelor of Science in Culinology from Southwest Minnesota State University. Welcome, Harper.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for having me here today.
And next we have Rena Pfeifer. She's co-founder of Homescape Pets. And in addition to sending my puppy a wonderful care package when I first asked her to be on the panel, I will tell you that she, along with her husband, Marcus, started Homescape Pets in 2018 after their first dog became ill and she couldn't find natural, affordable supplements. Homescape Pets creates dietary supplements and treats to address common health issues dogs and cats face, including anxiety, pain, joint issues, and dental disease. She has been featured in Modern Dog Magazine, BuzzFeed, Austin Business Journal, and New York Magazine for their award-winning supplements that have helped thousands of dogs and cats live healthier, happier lives. And she's also a member of Naturally Austin, which is an affiliate group of Naturally Network. That's how I met her. And I'm so glad that she's here on the panel. Welcome.
Hey, Amy. Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And Amy, would you like me to introduce the next two panelists?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, great. What a great group so far. I'm a big dog lover. I'm getting a new lab, so I'm going to call Rena about her products. I have the pleasure of introducing Michael Modjeski, who's joining us today. And Michael is the Chief Commercial Officer for a company that is an iconic company in our sector, Wakunaga. He manages commercial activities in 40 countries for this well-known brand, a product that I actually use. And he's been in this industry for many years, right? Several decades of experience and worked around the world and worked with many cultures and oversees marketing and operations and finance for many companies and helps this brand move into many markets around the US. So Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tom, for the introduction, and pleasure to be here. And thank you, Amy, for putting this on.
And then the other last panelist I'm introducing is Rena Cohen-First, and she's I had a chance to chat with her yesterday. She's the Vice President of Sales for Cepham, which is a company I know well and know the owner of, and great company in Ayurvedic botanicals. She has 25 years experience working with leading multinational brands and food and beverage companies and also in the supplement industry, has her MBA from the New York Institute of Technology, and served in the United States Army as a linguist. Thanks for your service, Rena. And that's my two introductions. Yeah. Hi, how are you?
Right. Thank you, Tom.
Good to see you again. Hi, industry friends and family. Very excited to be here. Thanks, Amy.
Now I turn it back to Amy for the final introduction.
Yes, our moderator for today is someone that everybody knows, probably just as well as Tom Aarts, and that is Heather Granato. She is the Vice President of Partnerships and Sustainability for the Food EMEA division of Informa. She's a 30-year natural products veteran and frequent presenter and publisher, author on industry trends. She joins us today from London. That's where she's based. And Heather leads efforts related to partnerships and broader sustainability initiatives for Vita Foods. She is a founding president of the Women in Nutraceuticals and serves on the board of directors for Organic and Natural Health Association. Heather graduated magna cum laude from the University of Richmond, Virginia, with a bachelor's degree in journalism. And I'm just going to go a little off script here, Heather, because she's giggling because we did this in rehearsal. She's like, I don't know that anyone cares about that I'm magna cum laude, but I just want to tell you, for somebody who didn't get any honors in college, that would be me. I'm always impressed that people get out of college. I mean, I was impressed. I got out of college with a degree. I was having nightmares about that forever. But so I think that that's lovely. And I also do want to say something about Heather. That if you know Heather, you are so lucky. She is such a champion of women in this industry. And it is actually Heather who was the first person in this industry to ask me to speak on a stage in front of the industry. And I remember when you asked me that, because I had never even considered myself a person that would do that. And it was back when you were doing content for Informa. I think it was Supply Side East or something. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you asked me to do that, it was just such an honor. And it especially coming from a woman, to ask a woman to do something like that. And it really set me up to get so many other speaking arrangements with Informa that I've been doing. But you saw that in me, and it was something that I didn't even see in myself. So I just want to thank you for that. And I think that you do that for a lot of women in this industry. You're super approachable. We've been talking about queen bees a lot on this series. You are not. You are so supportive, and I can understand why WIN is so fortunate to have you, that Organic and Natural Health is so fortunate to have you. And I know that Informa is just always glad that they have you in their court. But for women in this industry, you have done so many amazing things. So thank you. And with that, Tom and I are going to turn our videos off and mute and let you guys have a great session. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Amy. That was absolutely lovely. I'm going to have to pick up the recording and give it to my mother. Well,
Say that I think Heather is one of the best leaders in our industry, and she's very, very always there as a rock and support for me and the entire industry. So Heather, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate that. Well, I am absolutely delighted to be here today and excited about this conversation. I think it's really interesting that the number one takeaway out of session 4 was have respect for yourself and others. Because when we start thinking about communication, we're thinking about sexism and how we engage with others. It's kind of this idea of treating people the way you want to be treated, but does that really happen? And I think when we start thinking about this idea of having respect for yourself and others, we have to take a step back maybe and say, what does respect look like? So I'm going to ask each of you actually to give me your thought. What does respect look like for you? Nana, you're in my top right-hand corner. I'm going to start with you on this.
Okay, we're jumping right in. Let's do this. So for me, I would say respect is treating people with care. It really comes down to a matter of care, caring enough to think about how I impact other people and how my behavior impacts others. It's accepting people as they are for who they are. So that's how I think about respect with regards to myself and others.
I appreciate that so much. The idea that you really want to approach it from how they're looking to engage. Rena, my friend, what does respect look like to you?
It's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about it lately, as far as generationally between myself and my 25-year-old daughter and my 17-year-old son, and how we feel respect generationally. And for me, it's important to be seen the way I want to be seen, or to see others the way that they want to be seen. And, you know, for me, that would perhaps come across in my history as, you know, maybe feeling someone has been patronizing, or someone doesn't take into account my experience, or someone treats me like a little girl, you know, maybe not now, but in the past. And so that's one thing. But from younger generations' perspective, I see much more, a lack of respect my facade or respect what I want to be seen as and respect me as an individual. So I think it's changing, but it's a really interesting question. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think you're getting into this idea maybe of authenticity and the idea of being authentic to yourself and what you expect from others. So I appreciate that insight. Michael, let's come over to you next. Respect.
Okay.
What does that look like?
Well, coming from, I guess, a place of somebody who really believes that in the collective mind and it being more powerful than any one individual, it's about creating an environment where people can have open dialogues about things and being able to have hard conversations and set aside personal biases, demographics, any of those elements so that we can move forward to a better place. And, ultimately, we're here to further the cause rather than to take steps backwards.
I appreciate that idea of open dialogue, and probably goes back to what our parents said, that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So maybe you should be listening twice as much as you're talking.
Exactly. Yep.
Harper, let's come to you. The idea there of what does respect mean to you?
Yeah, and hearing everybody else's response, because now I'm coming in as the last one, I hear fragments from everyone that makes sense to me, of course, absolutely. I think if I were to build on any of that, it would be to request folks not imprint themselves on me. Right. And I feel like I have to make sure that I'm not doing this with my children as well. I am a parent of 2. My daughter turns 7 today, actually. So happy birthday to my daughter. A big day. And she's fierce. So as I'm sitting here with everyone today and honored to be on this panel and this conversation, I'm keeping her, in this room with me as well. But we have to follow what others are telling you of themselves, right? Again, back to that listening piece of the puzzle. If I tell you who I am, don't override that with your opinion of who I should be. Back to that fear of being seen as a little girl, right? Is another example of that.
No, that idea of truth and coming back to that authenticity. I really appreciate that. So we started off this session talking about the NBJ Summit and this idea of leadership. And certainly I'm delighted to hear that there's this emphasis on let's get up to the numbers. Let's get 1/3 of this year's attendees at NBJ, which could reflect what we're seeing across the nutraceutical industry. And I'm going to put a little teaser out there because Women in Nutraceuticals, we just did a study that was looking at diversity in leadership, and specifically what's our gender diversity. And I did tease out a little bit at Expo West, so I'm not going to give all the numbers, but we're looking at about 37% in the industry is, female in the industry. Okay, that's not bad. It's pretty much the same as food and pharma. Okay, that's not bad. It's not great, but I think it gives us a baseline where we can move from. Part of what we talk about, though, when we think about leadership is this idea of leadership styles. And we have different perceptions of leaders. Maybe they're more transactional, maybe they're more transformational. And some leaders, particularly in this industry, I think have come through different channels into leadership. Traditionally, and Rena, you and I have talked about this idea of coming through sales has been one of those traditional areas, and that goes into the senior leadership and C-suite. So is that still the case? Are we still seeing that some positions are routing into leadership in this industry? And are those positions necessarily skewing more toward men than they are toward women? Rena.
Absolutely. So I love this topic and I've enjoyed our discussions about it. My experience has been largely in sales, and it's an area that I've spent some time as somewhat of an activist in for women in sales. And the reason for that is because the vast majority of Fortune 500 CEO positions have had a background in sales. And there was a study in 2014 by Hewlett Packard that showed that women need 100% of the confidence to approach risk, whereas men need 60%. So for a very large contributor to the pipeline to C-suite, you're knocking out a pretty big percentage right off the bat. Now, I love the topic of sales because I think for women and for, I'd say, for anyone, you can really differentiate yourself. There are very low barriers to entry in sales. Now, the flip side is there's a very big limit in education. There are no set of standardized competencies, and women have a different approach to sales. And little shameless plug, I'm sorry, Heather, but The Authentic Sale, A Goddess's Guide to Business, the reason I wrote it is because, I was sick of it, and I wanted to give people a how-to from my gender. The other reason is to drive more people in to see the opportunity. I think for traditional line management, which is the other way to C-suite, not staff, but line management, for roles that have metrics that are easily definable, I would imagine it's possibly easier to get in because it's a harder argument. It's less subjective, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the other thing I would say is, in my opinion, being cross-functional and having experience in sales and marketing, technical, absolutely, goes a long, long way. And it's been one of the ways that I've been able to, I'd say, compete, being able to talk the talk of the vast majority of people who are not my gender. So that's my long answer to your question.
No, that's great. And I think about this idea of your career progression as a jungle gym and not a ladder. And I think that was a Sheryl Sandberg comment.
Yes.
But we're looking at career advancement. Are there things that men are doing because they are progressing on a ladder that women aren't, as they're on a jungle gym, that may be holding women back? Are there other things that men are doing that are advancing them into leadership? Any comments?
Can I
Michael,
Michael,
Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot on that one.
We'll
get your perspective. I am. I said I was going to ask you certain questions, and then I'm just going off the grid.
All right. Could you rephrase possibly? Just
absolutely. So, men and women, you've got them. They're looking to have this career advancement. Are there things that men are doing that are advancing them at a faster pace? Or in greater numbers that women are not doing? Or do you think that this is just, it's something that's a holdover? Because at this point, the pipeline has, certain amount of people are coming up through it. Can we fill the pipeline at the lower levels so that 10 years from now, we're not having the same conversation?
Yeah, if I think back on my experience, going back, to the 80s, I think we're dealing with a different set of components today than we were back then. I feel like we've made some good strides to it becoming less gender specific in terms of that ladder. And it really, for me as a professional in the industry, it really boils down to the individual and their particular drives and their goals and career aspirations, as well as the leadership that is helping to mentor those people and to achieve those aspirations. So I personally don't see it as being something that there's, a particular gender bias in that career path. And I think it does, I don't know that there's a ladder anymore, to be honest with you. I think it's all a jungle gym, and it's a matter of being able to be open-minded to things and take on new challenges that help you to advance.
I like that. I also think that as we're talking about this, we've also got this issue of confidence. We started with respect, the idea of having confidence to command respect also comes into this issue of self-worth. But you also have confidence can be this, oh, she's so aggressive, she's so out there, but there are ways to display confidence, to, own your respect. Harper, I'd love to turn to you on this one. When we start talking about respect, self-worth, how do we help people within our industry find their own confidence that will help them in their career progression?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one as I reflect on my own journey, as I've reflected on my own journey and my own experiences so much during this entire panel session, we'll say, the past 4 or 5 weeks. as I told everybody yesterday on our practice run, you know, when I think back on this, I think it's about access, really, when it comes down to it. It's about removing some of those own internal biases, as Tom was talking about in the very beginning of today's conversation with Amy. But how do we even access that in the first place? That sort of awareness. When does that happen, right? So I remember my manager, actually, I'll talk about my manager. I seem to always talk about my manager, but in my own journey, a really key moment for me, he had led me as a professional before I transitioned. I was assigned female at birth, and I identify as transmasculine, non-binary. And of course, he's leading me now again a few years after, and has seen me go through my transition. When I applied for this position, and much to what Michael was saying, you know, the stand up and take the risk, put yourself out there and feel that sort of bravery, that confidence. How do you, you know, build that up to go out there and take that risk? You know, he said to me point blank, and he prefaced it with, "I don't mean any disrespect to you," but he did use my dead name. The dead name is a name that you were given, is another term for that. Harper is not my original name. I did legally change it. He said, "I would not have hired dead name for this position, but I hired you. I hired Harper because I recognize in you now this confidence that has suddenly shown up in the room, and it brings this power with it." And I think when we are told repeatedly over time, and I was imprinted with the assigned female generalizations, don't take too much space, you know, make sure that you don't raise your voice too much, you'll be seen as aggressive, where on the flip side of that, we're always told that men are seen as go-getters instead of aggressive, right? When they step out there on that limb and they say, yeah, I can do that. It's just a different feeling of that from society. You know, what I hope to achieve by standing up here today, sitting, being with everyone today, is to help folks maybe feel like they can start to access that a little bit more, right? Think about it from an access point of view, and whatever that takes to kind of unfold. And I kind of hope I can do that with some of my teammates here at Ingredion as well.
That's wonderful, and certainly very inspiring. I think your comment about the go-getter, I saw both Rena and Nana going, yes, yes. Nana, would you have any comments on that? This idea of, you know, confidence and respect?
Absolutely. So growing up as not only a female or as a woman, but also as a Black woman, there's automatically those things that are assigned to us, as in, if I'm confident, if I walk into a room confidently, if I speak to someone confidently, I can be either looked at as, wow, that's nice, like that's an unusual thing, or I am the angry Black woman. So, but I was also told, ignore all that, walk into that room with confidence. And so to Harper's point, I totally can relate to the person that you once were and then becoming the stronger, better, different, newer version of yourself, being able to go into those same rooms and exude that confidence and get the things, or at least begin working towards the things that you wanted. I have my own personal, experiences have been that, yes, men are always known to be naturally confident. They naturally walk into the room, so they naturally are going to get more. Whereas we have to work harder. And in a number of cases, we have to address the things that are perceived, the things that we're women, so we can't do this particular position. We can't take on this particular assignment because we've got other duties, household duties, childhood duties, mom, wife, caretaker duties. And so we're automatically assumed that we can't manage that. And so we're not considered for those same positions, regardless of the accolades, regardless of our experiences, and regardless of our education. Still have a little bit of that. Those things are detractors. Being a woman can be a detractor in the eyes of those decision makers. And that's something we are dealing with now, in the past, and hopefully not in the future.
Hopefully not in the future, but I think you're touching on this idea of this, like, unconscious bias that we all carry with us to some degree with our interactions. And when we go back to this idea of authenticity and respect, meeting people where they are, being open and vulnerable to have the conversation. And if someone says, gosh, Heather, that's not at all what I was talking about, I need to be ready to go, I'm sorry, can you help me? Help me understand. And that's hard. It is hard to admit that you're wrong or that your point of view might not be as inclusive as you think it is. It's looking at other people's lived experiences and respecting that. And, when you're looking at this kind of intersectionality or, Harper, your transition and, looking at things from two different types of lived experiences. The book that I read recently called The Authority Gap actually talked about and interviewed people who said, I couldn't have related to this before, but I've lived as a woman and now I'm living as a man and I'm just treated completely differently and vice versa. So I think that's interesting. Something they brought up was this idea of, fear and, transitioning from a male to a female, wow, all of a sudden I've got this fear I didn't have before. Harper, could you give us some thoughts on this idea of lived experiences and, how do we help others?
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, it's heartbreaking to think of the fear that is going on, that has been going on, honestly. And hopefully we can start to peel back those layers and work as a society to kind of deconstruct some of that and heal from some of that. When we end up inserting falsehoods, whether we do it intentionally or not, into concern about legitimate issues, we end up with this space that begins a spiraling of fear, right? And that is often what we see around, I would say, pretty much any underserved community where there's a fear of something going on, right? And the transgender experience, there's fear on both sides of the fence right now, right? Of course, I am setting up for a larger meeting around safety coming up. I believe that's next week on my calendar, to discuss what do we do? How do we handle this as employers? As we had mentioned, how do we tackle these challenges as employers, around particularly access when it comes to buildings, right? Of course, but and that's part of the piece of the puzzle, right? A transgender woman absolutely cannot go into a men's restroom safely, and a transgender man cannot go into a women's restroom safely. But if these are monitored by what organs we have or what we don't have, and I always seem to end up talking about restrooms. I apologize for this. I did the same thing at Nutrition Business Journal Summit, but it just happens. We take this every day as a thing that we just have to do. And we know these are not safe spaces, right? The way that they're set up in the United States. When we look at that, do we then add more facilities, right? How as employers do we handle that? Is there a reason to add more facilities? If we can, how do we elevate that? Same thing for just women's facilities in general and access for women in general. These spaces, lactation rooms, I'm going after lactation rooms again here in where I'm located in New Jersey. We do not have an accessible lactation room in most of our campus here. So how do we handle these things? And again, these are very guarded areas, and in part for good reason, but in part it's also because of this fear that's been set up and set aside by falsehoods and misinformation. So hopefully we can start to work through some of that and get somewhere in the future.
I hope so. And I appreciate bringing up this idea of safe spaces. From that perspective, we've also talked about safe spaces for women. How do we create safe spaces? But then do we have, are there non-safe spaces? And if we're looking at, there was discussion in the natural products industry about trade shows. Are there safe spaces and less safe spaces? And, that is certainly something that we all take a look at. And again, trying to relate to people as people, and how do you maybe confront when you're seeing things that are uncomfortable or unsafe? Any thoughts, maybe Michael, when we're talking about, safety and safe spaces, what does that What does that look like? And what else do women need within our industry?
I think, sorry, I got something going on in my earbud. Sorry.
Are you listening to like a rock concert at the same time,
I am.
Michael?
I'm rocking
okay,
out.
okay.
Yes.
I just wanted the ownership of that. Thank you.
You know, safe spaces, you know, for I'm going to go back to safe spaces for all, kind of as a starting point. And that comes back to my whole original comments about respect. We need to have a space for all of us to be safe, and realizing, kind of as Harper had said before, you know, there's a dearth of safe spaces in you know, facilities that for women, in the case of lactation rooms and those kinds of things. That's something that, as we look at moving the ball forward, we should be more mindful of the need for and the accommodations to provide for all, right? And you know, from a standpoint of safe spaces in our work environments, I really come back to the point where I feel they should be safe for all people, you know, and that goes back to that whole respect aspect.
I like that, safe for all. And when we talk about safe for all, so far we've been, you know, talking a lot in binary terms, male and female. However, we've got a lot of, you know, conversation happening right now about non-binary, and we have a particular construct that has been set up within our society. And, you know, this translates to everything from the restrooms to the pronouns to, you know, how are you defined when you just walk into the room and people see you and they make assumptions, they have biases. Rena, you and I have discussed this, and this idea that we're trying to build an inclusive society, we're trying to build an inclusive, broader industry, and yet it's always so much easier to just go to that easy thing to put somebody into a little bit of a box. So give me a little bit of your perspective on this inclusion.
Sure. You know, I had in 2018, I did a talk on generational feminism. And at the time, Generation Z was, you know, I think 15 years old at the top. And my daughter, who, you know, I've mentioned, she's a satellite engineer. She is definitely not your, you know, I'd say what you would have seen in the 1980s or 90s in my generation of a, you know, fierce little warrior. So, you know, there's a feminism as it's been in the past is very different to what it is now. And I won't say it's getting better. I won't go that far. But I will say a lot of what was taught in the beginning were, you know, books like Gail Evans, Act Like a Man, Win Like a Woman, right? So very clear indication on having a facade. And it was taught across everyone in the 80s and 90s had one, especially in the military, right? So nowadays I'm seeing people, you know, I have a nibbling, which is a word I just learned. My sister's child, Cass Berta, is actually an Academy Award winning. They were on a CODA, actually, so won an Academy Award. But they are a champion for gender nonconforming language, and they teach sex education. Really, really interesting person, 24-year-old person. I will send a link to their LinkedIn, because they are also a consultant and trainer if any organization would like to broaden their, I'd say, knowledge base. To me, I'll tell you a really quick little metaphorical story. Made me think of it. My dad just lost his sister. She was in her 90s, and she has been institutionalized she's autistic, had been for her entire life. And my dad, you know, we all sort of, you know, put my dad, I'd say, on the genius, let's say Asperger's spectrum a bit, because he wasn't very communicative for our entire life. Now he's just, you know, he's suffering from prostate cancer, not uncommon in the 80s, but in his 80s. But they removed testosterone from his diet. First thing they did, they took testosterone completely out because it's toxic for prostate. And so, you know, as my dad started writing beautiful prose and poetry. And so very interesting, his sister passed away. We had 3 weeks of rain. We had an earthquake, and a eucalyptus tree, I kid you not, fell in my yard. as my dad is saying, Rena, did you feel the earthquake? And he's suffering, he's grieving from the loss of his sister. And I'm thinking, this is amazing. You never know what's behind the wall of someone. Suddenly my dad is writing poetry as he grieves for his sister. And it made me think, that wall in the younger generations, they don't want it. People don't want a wall. They want to be who they are. And good for them. I mean, so for me, and talking to Cass and really learning, and they said, look, you're ahead of most people. I mean, good for you for asking. It's not easy for any of us. We need to have those conversations. We need to talk about it. We need to learn. It's not easy for us. I just turned 50, not easy, but we're getting there. So I would say, I would, go back to safe spaces, Heather, that comment. I think for people to really be themselves is essential. And we're going to have to learn it as an industry because it's not going to change. This is the way it is. So yeah. There it is. There's
brilliant. And I'm going to go a little bit off the script just a little bit, because you brought up this idea of the learnings that you're taking away from your father, who's in his 80s, and from your nibbling.
My nibbling.
There you go.
Term. I just learned it today.
In 20s. We learn so much from different generations. They challenge us, and hopefully we're challenging them as we all go through this journey. I'd love to get some perspective from each of you on what are some of the learnings you're having as you're talking with either older or younger folks that maybe is helpful to you, your career, your life, and how you're engaging. Nana, let me start with you on this.
Well, that's interesting. I don't exactly know what generation I fall into. Like, I don't, I'm X, Y, millennial. I don't know. But what I do know is that the younger generation that's coming up now, that's particularly in the entrepreneurial space, they are incredible about creating openness and living an open life, living a very authentic life, and being a lot more inclusive than generations that are mine and that are older than me. So to your question about safe spaces, the one thing I have learned from younger generations is a safe space, it comes in various forms, but a safe space is primarily an honest space, being honest with who you are and what you can and cannot accept. Because once you have that, give that real honesty, people can make informed decisions about how they want to engage with you. And so the safety comes in the honesty. But I also think that there is something to be said for not being, for us as women, not being so segregating ourselves in ways that require people to tiptoe around us or to other us. So creating a space that is truly open for all of us, because what we don't want is to have a situation where we're so concerned and so deeply entrenched in having everything be segregated and divisive that we now lose what we're working towards. So that's sort of a lot of what I've learned from the younger generation. And the older generation, I've sort of, I don't know, I've learned some interesting things from older generations that I'm probably not going to take with me as I continue to grow.
And I think that's an important thing, that we are taking things from the older generation, and you think, wow, okay, that is not something that I am going to share with others. I think that that's not okay. And do you challenge it? Do you let it go? Do you say, Grandma, we don't actually use those words anymore? What are we doing there? Michael, comments from you on this generational learning?
Well, being one of the older generation, I don't listen to myself very much anymore.
Fair.
So, in all seriousness, there are things I feel learning with the younger generation today. Absolutely, I feel like there's a lot more openness and reach for inclusion. It's about accepting who they are. There's less, I would say, let's see, delineation between roles and responsibilities, and it's about trying to be more open and communicative about things. And I think that that's a very positive thing to look forward to for our future of our industry. If you think back many years ago, and this is not specific to the dietary supplement space, but if you think about where the natural products industry was 30 years ago, right? It was a very inclusive space, I feel, because we were the snake oil, right? We were like kind of the one-offs that were trying to do better and to do good. And it's changed a lot. Why? Because we've gotten into a lot more bigger corporate structure that's come into the industry. It's really changed the dynamics of it. And now we're seeing forward progress with the younger generation today coming in and looking for that inclusion and trying to be open-minded about things. And I think that there's some great learnings for me personally that I've taken away from that, and it's helped further solidify my desire to have that collective mind approach to our business and really and to our community to be able to propel it forward.
Thanks. I had a follow-up question for you, Michael, that came in from our audience asking whether you think that corporate boards or senior management across the industry, we've got a lot of big companies, are they having these types of conversations? Are they talking about sexism? Are they talking about career progression, inclusion?
Well, I can't know firsthand because I'm not part of those conversations, but I believe and that those conversations are taking place, and I also hope that they are taking place. It is something that is essential for us to continue to grow as a community and really to drive our natural products industry and also just society forward.
Thank you. Harper, you've got a fierce little girl with a birthday today, and when you're looking at different generations, what are you hearing? What are you taking away? What are you sharing?
Yeah. When I think back on some of the older generations and some of the things that I've been told, heard, seen, again, yeah, maybe there's too much honesty in some of that. Maybe there's things that should be filtered a little bit more. But again, to Nana's point, though, we don't want to. How do we balance the two? How do we balance this look at defining ourselves, trying to understand ourselves, trying to communicate that openly with everybody, but then also, for lack of a better term, let me try and think of a better term here, not over monitor that, right, in a way. And just right there, as I was thinking of things, our language is a choice. We make constant choices, and I think that is something that my children and the younger generations are teaching us more. I'll put myself as one of the older folks. I am the eldest millennial. You'll probably come across one of the eldest anyway, and I did not come out until 3 years ago, roughly, a little bit more than that now. And that journey has repeatedly taught me that there is a constant need for assessing and evaluating and making a choice. And those choices just pick a direction at some point and go with as much wisdom as you can at that time, and realize that choice is also informed by that time and that frame that it happens within, right? I didn't have all of my language right away. Now I've got more language. Language gives us power. So I think navigating some of that is really critical. And that's some of what I have learned from my children, to be a little more fluid and forgiving on some of those definitions and timestamps.
Right. Well, certainly language is a choice. And we had a question come in for you. How do you go about a situation when maybe someone misgenders you, using pronouns that maybe aren't your pronouns? What's your response in that kind of situation?
My response? I try to be as patient as I can be. And it happens. It shocks me, actually, when somebody calls me he or refers to me as one of the gentlemen, and I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, cool, that's it. You got it. You're getting there. I sometimes hear my colleagues are super, super supportive in this. They were so incredible with my name change, actually, that happened faster than I thought I was emotionally ready to accept or be there myself for. I was a little bit of shock. But when it comes to pronouns are a lot harder to train, it seems. So I'm constantly repeating. Some folks get it. Some folks revert to he because it's easier for them than they. I've had conversations in the hallway, of course, and I know that microaggressions came up earlier in conversations in the panels. You know, is it a microaggression when somebody says, but they's plural? That might be more than a microaggression, in my opinion. They can be used in the singular. And what I actually did with my mother was I showed her an example one day, spoke to her about it. I said, when you find somebody's book bag, say you're a teacher and somebody leaves their book bag in your classroom, and I just did it there, you don't know whose it is. You say, hey, somebody left their book bag. Does anyone know whose this is? You don't sit there and say, you know, he or her left his or her book bag, you know, he or she left his or her book. It's just too much. Sometimes folks do say, can you use my name instead of pronouns? And I think that's where the respect piece of the puzzle comes in again. Listen to the language people are using, right? Listening and respect. But it did help her at least understand that, no, you use they as a singular every single day. It's just when we see folks, and I think this is what happens, we see folks, we imprint on them what we expect of them. So we therefore then say you're male or female. I don't know exactly where that leaves folks who might have a different experience. I know non-binary experience is different from the intersex experience, right? So as people start to explore and question these, and I think we're in a stage of questioning, question these things, yeah, there's some pushback from different groups and different sides and different thoughts, but it's great to be able to come together and have these conversations and debate about that. And really, I think the language, though, gives us strength to debate that in the first place.
Thank you. The language issue is so very powerful, and the way we choose what we say and how we engage with respect is an important aspect. One of the words, yes?
Sorry. Can I
no,
have a follow-up question to ask Harper, if it's okay?
Of course.
Hey, Harper, question for you. Do you find that you get misgendered by any particular group more than others?
Not really. I feel like the folks who get it right are usually the folks who know me. And they're usually the teams who work with me closer every day, because we've been through this. But they're also the folks that knew me for 12 years before I even started to say who I was in the workplace. So, because I've been here for 16 years now. So that time does add up. Many of them remember when I was pregnant. You know, many of them have seen different stages in my life. So I think kudos to the folks who have known me my entire career, actually, as we're talking about this, and do get my pronouns right. It means that they're really showing effort. They're really working hard to accept me, and they're not questioning me. They're just accepting me. And it's been a wonderful boon to my confidence in my professional life, for sure.
It's a beautiful experience and a story to have those people who really support you. And I think, you know, we're all looking for the people who are, you know, our tribe, our community, and hopefully our larger, you know, the pet industry, the ingredient space, like who are our people, you know, but at the same time, you know, there are the people who are maybe not so much in our tribe, and maybe that's the challenge that we're running into. So Nana, I'd love to ask you, have you had any, you know, moments in your career where you've been kind of specifically challenged around the issue of sexism, and how have you responded to that?
Yes, I've been fortunate in being in the pet space that I've not, now my company is my husband and I, so that sort of limits my engagements a lot of the time. But prior to being in the pet space, I was in the casino gaming industry in Las Vegas. And with that came a lot of what you would imagine as older generation, very, very solid in their thinking about the role that women play, particularly in Las Vegas or in the gaming industry. So as an executive in the industry, it was first difficult for me to get into it and to grow, but I was good at my job. So I was able to grow in spite of being a woman and in spite of being Black. And that's something I would normally not be able to say, that most people would normally not be able to say. If you're a white male, you naturally grow, you just naturally progress into these positions that I struggled to earn. And so when I got to a place where I knew my role, I knew my job, I knew my clients, I was still facing other clients. I was still facing the leadership team of my own casino that saw me and other women as less than and or not as capable of. And it was disheartening. And in those instances, I had to make a choice. I could either quietly accept these things, or I could say something and become everything that they thought that I was going to be, which was going to be aggressive and confrontational and sensitive. And I chose to lean into being the aggressive and confrontational and sensitive person, and let them know that these things that they were saying, the things that I was hearing, the sexist comments that were casually being given almost in a joking manner, I had to let them know as often as I could that those were unacceptable things. And I knew that that would be something for me that was going to, it was going to center me in a way that I did not want, and in a way that they didn't want, but it had to happen. And I was fortunate enough to have a direct leader who, once he got it, and he was prepared to handle it from top down with everyone else. And so I know that there were lots of others that did not have that experience. I was lucky. And I hate to say that I had to be lucky to have a man backing me up, to just have other men not treat me like crap, but I was lucky. And that became something that I was known for, sharing, pointing out in the moment, as uncomfortable as it might make everyone, pointing out when those comments were being made, or when I was being, and other people, when we were being addressed in a way that wasn't professional, or that wouldn't have happened if we were men.
Right. And Michael, I told you earlier I was going to put you on the spot with this topic. It's such a nice progression, this idea of allies, and how important it is to have someone, in your case, Nana, you've got this male executive. When he got it, he got it. When you're seeing something, maybe in the industry, Michael, or you're hearing comments, have you had experiences where sometimes you might speak up and you're addressing this, and other times maybe you're like, oh, that's hard. It can be hard to speak up and call things out.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say that my batting average is 1,000 for speaking up and doing things. If I look over my career, I can honestly say that it's not 1,000, but it's close to 1,000 as you could possibly think. And yes, I've been in situations where I've had to take, actually, without getting into specific details, had to take some action on previous employees that I worked with, either previous team members. And we really should have a zero tolerance kind of mentality for those types of behaviors. That's not reflecting well on each of us in a room. It's not reflecting well on an organization or an industry to have those kinds of things going on. And so the positive thing about doing that is you're propelling things forward. You're doing the right things, and you're trying to create that safe space for everybody to be able to be communal, and without any fear of any adverse events. I guess on the flip side of that, by being somebody who has those morals and taking those actions, for those people who may be the violators, you wind up possibly, not being part of that, or you get cast aside, or you cause, personal strife. But to be honest with you, that's not a loss, because if people are doing those kinds of things, that's got to change. And I don't want to be associated with those types of personnel, to begin with.
So appreciate that. Absolutely. I've got just a minute or so before my wrap-up comments. I'll open it up. Would any of you like to make a 30-second final comment? Something we haven't touched on?
Okay, I'll throw in one. It's an idea. I've been chewing on this idea. So on my side of the industry, natural products, ingredients, the restaurant industry, in my opinion, is an extension in many ways. Let's say an external food service extension. Maybe we should start recruiting into our industries from your general population demographics that we're not necessarily that comfortable with, so that we can start getting representation from real people, especially in the younger generation, and we can start offering opportunities for people who do not look like us, stop being so exclusionary, I would say, and offer training and mentoring, especially organizations that maybe don't have the gender balance that one day they may be called out for. What are they doing? So just a thought, an idea, go out, maybe do some recruiting. There are a lot of kids who want to get into our industry that don't even know it exists. So that's my final thought. Thanks.
I love it. I'd love to see lots more people coming into this industry with all kinds of diverse backgrounds and experiences, because it will only make what we do a lot more rich. Well, thank you all so much for your vulnerability, your passion and commitment, and joining me on today's panel. And certainly thank you to our attendees for attending this Elephant in the Room Sexism panel discussion for the supplements, ingredients, and pet sector of the industry. Please be sure to fill out the survey on our panel today for a chance to win a $25 Amazon gift card. I don't think, Michael, Rena, Nana, and Harper, I don't think you're allowed to win the gift card, because you probably just respond. You're like, I was great. But you can find the link to the survey in the event platform for this session. Next Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, we'll have the ideation, activation, and final session of the series. We'll be hearing from some of the Elephant in the Room attendees who will share their ideas inspired from this series on ways to improve the natural products industry so it is a healthy and successful place to work for everyone. And for a live discussion in response to this panel, head over now to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube and watch the After the Elephant session with Mark Allen of Late Night Health. You can find the links to these pages in the chat. So again, thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you so much to our mentor panelists for participating. And we will see you next week with a new panel who will share some inspired ideas to activate change in the industry. And Amy, I think I ran through those final notes faster than you even expected, but I guess that's just the way I am. I can song and dance. She says it was awesome. So yes, great experience, always on point. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.